Most hardcore. Some of them talk, but lacking in character. How can I relax when it's theft of innocence? The harmless are broken. Oh, what tragedy to meet death with the lost word unspoken. Hide it behind the foundations. Charity constructed house of euthanasia. Architects of house of cards remain hidden behind one noble cause. Extravagant facade masquerading as God. I don't buy it at all. I like the real thing raw. I tell the whole veil off. The lights on or off. I get mine either way. The stellar man in effect. I'll leave you free and breathless like true psychedelic acceptance. Worldview becomes transcendent. This midnight smoke is so high octane, paralyzing the presence. Hello everyone, welcome to the most hardcore news show on earth. It's This Week in Tyranny. I am your host Conrad Rogas. Today is Friday, September 15th. It is episode 41. We got a bit of a follow-up episode on This Week in Tyranny. I like follow-up episodes because it gives an opportunity to see if the things that I talked about were correct. So you could tell I like follow-up episodes a lot. So this is a bit of a follow-up on the Maui wildfires, the wildfires in Lahaina. I did this a couple episodes ago. Now the follow-up is not really about anything else other than Governor Josh Green's address to the media. He spoke to the media. He talked for about an hour because it is exactly 1 month after the fires broke out. This happened a few days ago, earlier this week, right? So it marked a month since the fires broke out. So he addressed the media, answered questions on a whole bunch of different topics. So I'm going to go through some of the things he talked about and expose many things. I gotta start the video by giving credit to Peggy Hall, because Peggy Hall's video is what made me do the video, because she actually already did this, right? She went through the not the whole thing, but a portion of this and broke it down, and her breakdown was good as well. So we should absolutely address it on This Week in Tyranny, and I'll approach it from a bit of a different perspective. But I'll link Peggy Hall's video and you should watch it. But honestly, it's a hard act to follow, this one. I really liked what she did. She is well researched. She's more knowledgeable than I am about these fires. You know, the details and the actions that were taken, the actions that needed to be taken. So definitely check her out. But see, I have my own unique area of expertise when it comes to this stuff. Like, the thing with me is big picture systems analysis. That's why I do This Week in Tyranny, because I can explain to people what is going on in the whole world, in all of the different aspects of life, in politics, in religion, in government, all these different things, in health, in science, and the occult, right, which many people are missing. Then also natural principles and logical principles. That's what I talk about. I approach this kind of stuff from a real rational point of view, and also I talk about human psychology, right? The human spirit, the human character, human development, a lot about the mind, right? So I'll approach it from that perspective. So it'll be covering a whole different list of topics. So the thing I need to begin with is the lecturing. The lecturing really hit me with this guy. I'm gonna try to keep it cool this video. I've gotten a little bit angry in my recent episodes because, well, look at the topics, obviously, right? But with Governor Josh Green, there's a definite lecturing tone. He's lecturing people, and he's not the only one. Many of these lawmakers, these governors, right? These governors, these mayors, ever since the pandemic, they took on this real lecturing tone, just talking to the people like they're children, like patronizing them, right? He actually used the phrase "learn their lesson." He said that people need to learn their lesson from the fires, right? So that really strikes me the wrong way, because this is like a natural disaster. This is a thing, sure, all of these natural disasters to a degree could be definitely have been prevented or at least prepared for it to some degree. But to say people need to learn their lesson, he's absolutely not in a position to be talking like that. Who is? He also said we either need to deal with these challenges up front or pay for it later. And he's suggesting like government policies, like environmental policies. But he's saying either deal with the challenges now or pay for it later. Like this has the tone of like a parent schooling a child, saying like, oh, you didn't want to do this and wait for this. Now look, now your toy's broken. This kind of lecturing, there's no place for it after people burned to death and their houses were lost. He also says about what we learned from COVID. He actually goes back to the pandemic now. Not just me. I of course will take it back to that because I'm doing big picture analysis. So I've noticed that ever since the pandemic, the tone has changed. There being a lot more lecturing, a lot more. There's a lot more of this now, right? But he actually said this. What we learned from COVID, talking about the different controls he could implement, right? Referencing like masks and lockdowns and stuff. That's what they learned from COVID. That's preparedness is really systems of control in place in case something bad happens. But this just is like talking to the people like you're talking to a child. What we learned from COVID. There's no we with government. Government is a they. We didn't learn any lessons. What he's talking about is a set of policies that have been implemented and behaviors that have been accepted by the people. Right? It's just about stuff that we've let go, that we've let our rights be transgressed upon. Okay? The advancement of an encroaching abuser. That's what this essentially is. This is the abuser bragging about the lessons that he taught to his victim. That's what Governor Josh Green is doing. I'll explain all of this in detail. But all of this lecturing, especially about collective responsibility. There's all this talk that the people need to do everything. The government doesn't need to do anything, but it's everything we need to do. Lecturing us, talking about learn our lesson, telling the people of Hawaii that they need to learn their lesson for what? The government was supposed to be presiding over, land and water, with the thought that they were going to be able to mitigate such a disaster should it happen, right? So no talk about their ineptitude. They're going straight to the agenda of what the world needs to do to change the climate in a way that these disasters won't happen, presumably. It's always about what the people need to do, never about what they need to do. Okay? Now let me continue that and go into the environmental agenda because that's what this is all about. The governor, Josh Green, talked about this climate change and global warming repeatedly through this speech. So he's saying it like it's a fact of existence that like carbon emissions or something like that caused these fires directly. Where did this presumed causality come from? I don't know. Where are the scientific, the data studies? Where are the research papers that have proven that the Hawaii wildfires were caused by anything? I don't know where all this supposed proof is coming from. He presents it as a fact. He actually said, quote, the climate has dried us up. He said the climate has dried us up. It's such a clumsy, unprofessional way to make a point. But he's making the point as if he has some type of scientific ground to stand on. And it's just not there. Some of these quotes are ridiculous, but the worst of all, I'll actually play it. But just in case, I'll say it first. I'll read it. When 9/11 happened, he says, we ended up having a whole new industry of security developed. Now that the Lahaina fires happened, and some of these other fires across the globe, I believe you're going to see a whole swath of policy that speaks to an era of climate change with superstorms.
When 9/11 happened, we ended up having a whole industry of security that developed. Now that the Lahaina fire has happened and some of these other fires across the globe, I believe you're going to see a whole swath of policy that speaks to an era of climate change with superstorms. So the climate has dried us up very clearly.
When did this become the narrative? In an era of climate change and storms, everyone is vulnerable. This is what he said. So is this the narrative now? Look how quickly that narrative developed. This was quick. And you know what? You can tell actually that he doesn't believe what he's saying. He doesn't actually mean what he's saying. He's lying to the people. These are political slogans, okay? There were political slogans during COVID-19 too. In an era of infection and contagion, everyone is vulnerable. You heard this type of stuff. And you could see that what's implied after every crisis is that everybody has to give up more and more power. Everybody has to become more and more controlled. And the tragedies and the disasters are never going to stop no matter how controlled you are. It's going to keep happening. And the real solutions are not to stand there and complain and wait for leadership to prevent disasters. They're not going to do it. You have to do the research. We have to find the solutions. And then we got to force the leader. If we don't get rid of the leadership, we have to force them to implement those solutions. We have to drive the solutions. That's the only way real change is going to occur. They're not going to change this. The disasters are going to keep happening because it's in their interest for them to keep happening. It keeps them in power. It keeps them making money. Okay? We need to do this. No one is going to do anything for us. Now, as he talks about this, he brings up all this emotion. And it's weaponized emotion. This is a power transfer driven by emotion. But they, Governor Josh Green and all these people in government, they don't feel that empathy for emotion. They want us to feel it, so we give our money and our power away to them. And how you know this is he invokes 9/11 in this speech multiple times. That's a major red flag. Because 9/11 is the ultimate example of a mass tragedy event that was done to weaponize the people's emotion and fear to get change done. And on a smaller scale, it's actually not a smaller scale, but just it's spread out as opposed to one major event. It's the school shootings. That's an even better example of a power transfer driven by emotional suffering. He talked about 9/11 multiple times, and he actually underlined the policy change that came after it. The stuff I've said many times on these episodes, he actually says it. I'll of course link to it. You could see this. He actually said that after 9/11 there was trillions of dollars spent in that new sector of security. Now when he says the sector of security, he means surveillance. That's the type of security we're talking about. We're talking about the TSA at airports. We're talking about cameras. We're talking about screening. We're talking about all this stuff that happened, the Patriot Act. That's surveillance of American citizens. The reason he said that about 9/11 is because he immediately drew the parallel between because he actually said the visceral nature of the fires. He talked about how visceral it is, talking about how horrible it is, right? And he said that because of how visceral it was, then no legislator would avoid the issue. So what is he saying? He's saying that the lawmakers feel now emotionally compelled to pass laws to allocate more resources for the Hawaii government and governments of different states. That's what he's saying. He's saying, we're going to get the people to give us more money because they feel bad. Watch the speech, watch the video. This is what he's saying. And weaponized empathy has always been a tool of totalitarianism and communism. This is how it goes. It's empathy. It's we feel bad for the poor, we feel bad for the sick, we feel bad for the stray animals. Who doesn't? But then what is the result of that? You're giving up money and power and control to the rulership, to the rulers. And then you're going to have more suffering, more poor people, more starvation. And all that empathy was wasted for what? We need to build up our communities, not put all our money out, throw it in a pool, and let the criminal take the money with the whole pool of money. You know, a fat guy in a suit will talk all about how tragic and sad something is, and then the poor exploited people will actually want to help, and they'll give their money even though he has all the money. The poor people will give their money. Why? Because they know what it's like to struggle and suffer. This is what it is. I came from the bottom, and my family, we're the types to give money. We're trying to make rent barely. Like, this is how it's always been. We're the ones donating to people who are suffering worse than us. That's how it goes. These people in suits, they don't give a dime. If they give something, it's to get it on the back end. You know, and meanwhile, these weasel rats in expensive suits, these private school cookie cutter rich dudes, rich drones, they feel no empathy at all. That's why guys like this can talk for an hour about people that burned to death and lecturing the whole world, you know, and pushing a globalist agenda, lecturing the world in the process. Those are the type of dudes that could do that. And then he goes on, and he talks about the speech he's going to give at the United Nations. Now, who gives speeches at the United Nations? People who want to bring in the new system of totalitarian control. Yeah? He said, when people see the pain we've suffered, they'll have to take us seriously. That's an actual quote. And this underlines my point. Fires, pandemics, terrorist attacks, school shootings. The rulers of this world love them because they take the emotional weight of that, and they present the emotional pain as an argument, like it's a logical argument, as if the sadness is some sort of logical scientific justification of authority's power grab. But it isn't. It's just suffering. It should not be used as a political means of action. Right? This is disgusting. And they do this because they know that emotion drives action in this world, not thought. Thought doesn't drive action in this world. Not really. People are driven by emotions. The people that are driven by thoughts are a select few. And I'm not even saying that they're right. Emotions should drive action. But that's why they weaponize your emotions, because the people don't have enough knowledge to redirect that in the right place. Because I feel emotion about this too. I feel emotion about these fires. I feel emotion about all this injustice, especially against women and children, going on in this world. But you see, the things I do and the things they do are much different. They throw their money at a problem and let a guy in a suit decide where it goes. Me, I put my shoulder and my voice into the problem, and I do something about it. And then when he said that about the United Nations, he actually said that he brought as a solution of what's going to help deal with these disasters in the future. He actually said and then he called himself, he was going to say smart cities. What are smart cities? Many of the viewers know what this is. You should look it up. It's this United Nations new dystopian plan of having a city that is totally surveilled and controlled, that you basically can't even go outside of it, and everything is packed into this city that will just maximize productivity, and everything is basically planned out for you, like your food. There's barely any choice at all. It's just a prison cell. It's a city-wide prison cell. So let me talk about this guy's character, right? Save the worst for last. He was actually asked about an apology from the Hawaii government, because they mismanaged it so bad. If you want to know about the details of how they mismanaged it, you should go to Peggy Hall's video. I talked about it a bit in my episode. You should just go to hers. She honestly does a good job. But I talked about this too. How did they actually mess it up? So this journalist, this media member, asks the question, are they going to apologize, since they're the ones who are entrusted to maintain health and safety, right? Obviously, that's the government. So what he says is, he gives you the, I am so sorry that you went through this. His actual quote is, I am so sorry that you went through this, of course. And that's not an apology. That's a slap in the face of an apology. He's not saying, I'm sorry. He's saying, I'm sorry that you went through this, of course. Who even talks like that, you know? And then he goes on to say, it's the world who has to apologize. That's ridiculous. And that's exactly what I said, that collective responsibility is going to be put forward as now the solution to this and the prevention of a next disaster. And they're so quick to go right to that. They don't even know why it happened, how many people are missing, what's going on, how are they going to help people, but they're saying, okay, now the world has to apologize for this. And implied is what? All these environmental controls, these carbon taxes, what? Limits on travel? Yes, that's what they want. Limits on production, limits on transportation, reducing your ability to make money, like as a truck driver, as anything, as a farmer. He's saying that the world needs to apologize because the world has turned their backs on global warming. Where do you get this kind of lecturing from? He stands in front of in front of the people who live there. Like, he stood there in person and said this, you should watch this. And what he's saying is that the people of the world are being punished. That's what this is. This is a punishment. He's saying that the people of the world are being punished for rejecting the globalist narratives and punished for not giving up enough money and power. Right? Josh Green, this guy, he's a guy that wears Hawaiian shirts under his suit jacket. This is not a Hawaiian guy. This is a Jewish guy from New York. Why do you let people like this run your life? Why do people think that they have to vote for somebody like this to be in this position? Take charge of your own life. You know, this so-called man is a fake. He's a weasel. Call it what it is. He's a weasel. He's a rat. He has zero self-respect. You know what he said? He said, our lawyers he talks about like their lawyers versus different lawyers. He's saying even our lawyers with the spirit of aloha in them. He's saying that like he's a Hawaii native. He's not. This is an actor. And also, if you watch him, he has these fake, like, feminine head movements. He'll go like submissive head movements, like submissive facial expressions, to be more expressive, to appear to be more empathetic and submissive. And that's what I call a snake, because he puts on an act to come across as more endearing than he is. Right? That's why he's transitioned. He used to be a doctor. He transitioned from being a doctor to a politician because of this incredible ability to play this completely non-threatening, soft, just like a harmless talker. That's why he became a politician, because he's a natural. He plays the role so well. He plays it so well you could tell that there's nothing left inside of him. See, usually liars have at least the self-respect to have some shame. You'll at least see some emotion in their eyes, some sort of real human emotions. And you know, I talked about my expertise in psychology and character, and it's not only from studying it extensively, which I have, modern, classical, and ancient. I've studied the human mind, right? The mind is my field of study, but that's not all. My expertise with human beings and their character and things like this, because I've seen it. I've seen the worst. I talked about, you know, my history, how I came up. I used to be a drug dealer and a drug addict and just a general street criminal, thief, everything. I've seen the lowest of the low, right? I've been robbed at gunpoint, and I've robbed somebody at gunpoint. So in that moment, behind the gun, you see a pair of eyes looking at you, right? There's all these feelings, you know, fear, betrayal, anger. But you see that pair of eyes, even with the mask under it, and you see a pair of eyes looking back at you, and they're alive. At least their eyes are alive. You know, that human being may be in a completely different place than you, but he is a man just like you, right? Now, unlike Josh Green, who's robbing you at gunpoint, lecturing you, belittling you, disrespecting you, he's threatening you and your children, and you're looking into his eyes behind the gun and you see there's nothing there at all. So why are we letting people like that rob us? The answer to that is we have to look into the mirror, look at ourselves, because that's where the real answer lies. Thank you very much, and that's it for This Week in Tyranny.